So hopefully everybody can now see the slides. Gerald, I'm relying on you as the only other person who can speak.
I can see them. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are to everybody. Thanks for joining this session. I can see the slides, Maria, all good. And from my point of view, we're ready to go.
All righty, so let's go ahead and do that then. So as Gerald said, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maria Colgan. I'm one of the product managers here at Oracle Database. Joining me today on the call is Gerald Venzl, also one of the product managers for the database here at Oracle. And between the two of us, we hope to be able to answer any questions you may have on the Oracle database. So before we get going, what we thought we'd do is just whet your appetites a little bit by sharing with you some information about what's new with the Oracle database of late. So without further ado, let me jump into that and share with you the latest Oracle database news. So I guess the most exciting thing is the fact that we've recently released Oracle 18C, and with that release of the Oracle database comes basically 12.202. So this first patch set to the 12.2 database, and the aim with 18C is to now start these annual releases that will give us incremental improvements and focused on stability of the database. So basically give you as the customers an opportunity to try out some of the new features and functionalities, but take them in more bite-sized chunks rather than waiting 3 or 5 years for a new release. You'll be able to start adopting these new releases sooner because the amount of things that will change in the database will be far less than it would have been in a major release going forward. Now you can see the current release schedule for the database on the Moss note that's listed there on the slide, and all of what we're covering today will be available in a video recording for you to check out afterwards, so there's no need to scribble that down, but we do give you the current release schedule in a Moss note, and in that Moss note it will talk about the new release and the update model that we're going to use for the database, and things like how long a particular release is going to be supported. So with this new approach that we're introducing with 18C, what you're going to get is a new yearly release. So once a year, there'll be a new database version, hence the naming convention change. So instead of being 12.202, it's going to be 18C for 2018. The next release will be 19C and so on. On top of that, we've changed the way we're patching the database. So we've really simplified the patching. Instead of offering you multiple different possibilities, things like CPUs, PSUs, and bundle patches, we've simplified it into one patching strategy. It's called a release update. It will come quarterly, just as it did before. Release updates will contain all the latest security patches that we have for the database, as well as any bug fixes and enhancements that are needed. Also on a quarterly basis, we'll release the release update revisions, or an RUR. And what that's going to allow us to do is build upon the previous release update, applying only security fixes and any bug fixes due to regressions that were introduced in the previous release update. That's the only two things that'll change in an RUR. That gives folks the ability to perhaps be a little bit more conservative and apply these fixes 6 months after they've been released, so that they can be sure that they've been well tested and that applying that RUR or the release update revision will be a little more a conservative and safer approach to patching. If you need a fix immediately, then of course you'll do the release update. But otherwise, you can just wait for the release update revisions. And unlike our previous patching strategy where you had to pick a lane and stay in that lane, you can now go between release updates and release update revisions, which is nice. You can switch back and forth. So while you're in testing or in development, you can be aggressive in your patching, always applying the latest release updates. But when you go production, you might think to take a more conservative approach and apply the release update revisions. What's nice about this strategy is you'll never be behind on the security patching though, because even the release update revisions will have the latest security fixes in them. So how does this look for extended support type approach? Because of course, in the past, customers have always looked to wait for perhaps the version of a release that's going to offer them extended support so that that's the release they're going to jump to. So the diagram in front of you now is supposed to kind of give you some idea of how we are going to manage this. So in previous releases, for example, most of you are probably running on 11.2, and it's most likely 11.204, which is in extended support until 2020. If we look at 12.1, you see that it's extended support to 2021. And 12.2, the family that makes up 12.2, is in extended support until 2025. And we believe the terminal release of that 12.2 family will most likely be 19C, which will be supported all the way through till 2025. That is expected, that is Oracle Database 19C is our expected long-term support release. Now, things do change, so you always want to make sure that you're checking with that MOS node I mentioned earlier on. It's MOS node 742060.1. It'll have the latest schedule and the latest release information for you there.
And Maria, we already have the first question on that. The question is this change in RU and RUR applicable only on 18C?
So my understanding is that even in 12.201, we've started to move towards the RU and the RURs. But of course, moving forward from 18C onwards, this will be the strategy. But I believe 12.201 is also adopting this, but 11.204 will remain as it is. Okay,
and
so
just follow-up question, just on that, how about 12.1?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer for 12.1, which way it's going to go. For now, I would assume it'll stick with the original patching model that we had prior to this. But we'll get some confirmation on that and let you know.
Okay, thanks.
So before I hand over to Gerald, who's going to give us some more updates, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that when we initially introduced 18C at Open World, we also introduced something called the Oracle Autonomous Database. And there was a lot of confusion where folks thought perhaps the Autonomous Database was just 18C. And if I downloaded, 18C and I installed it, I would get all of the benefits that have been mentioned in the Autonomous Database. And that's actually not true. The Autonomous Database, although uses 18C, that's not the only component within the Autonomous Database. So just to clear things up, what is the Oracle Autonomous Database? Well, what it's going to do is it's actually made up of multiple components. And the goal of the Autonomous Database is to basically automate all of the database and infrastructure aspects of running the Oracle database, as well as automating all of the cloud operations. So the Autonomous Database runs on, of course, the best platform, the most optimized platform for the database, which is Oracle Exadata. And it has got expanded infrastructure automation within it now for this. We've got Oracle 18C, which does, of course, also have expanded database automation in it. And it's running on the Oracle Cloud, which allows us to automate all of the data center and database operation tasks, giving us this complete package that makes up the Autonomous Database. So it's the combination of all of these things that allows us to produce the Autonomous Database. So simply saying, is 18C the Autonomous Database? The answer to that is no. It is a component of the Autonomous Database, but it's not actually the Autonomous Database. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gerald. And Gerald, for now, do you want to just play Mr. Ellison and just ask me for the next slide?
Yeah, actually, before I do that, there's another follow-up question on the new release model that just came in. And the question is, will the various Oracle applications which are in Premier or extended support be recertified annually for the new DB releases?
So they won't be recertified annually for the new releases, no more than they were recertified for patch sets in previous releases. So what they'll end up doing is probably certifying for a family of, and if I just go back 2 slides, so for basically any of the applications that are certified on 12.2 are probably going to be fine with running 18C or 19C. Typically, the applications didn't certify 12.2 and then certify 12.202 or 12.203. So most likely they'll pick a version of that family and then they'll certify on that. So we don't expect it to be on every annual release, but we do expect them to pick, the applications to pick a member of that family, probably most likely the extended supported member of that family, to certify on.
Thank you, Maria. So I'll do play Larry then and just ask you to jump to the next slide. So a couple of things that have changed in the recent landscape of how to provision Oracle database. If you aren't aware of it yet, we did announce database support on Docker containers, or running inside Docker containers, back in December 2016 already, so over a year ago. The support is only given if you run Oracle Linux 7, Unbreakable Enterprise Kernel 4 or higher, or Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. We also have made images available on the Docker store, and actually also Oracle has launched its own image registry called the container registry. So you can find this at container-registry.oracle.com, where you will find the same images as well. And you will not only find database images there, but also other Oracle software products that are packaged up into Docker images that you can pull there and then run. We also have Docker build files on GitHub. That's actually how we started. So we made those build files. Those are scripts that essentially spit out a Docker image for you then to run, available first on GitHub, and drove it from that. That was half a year prior to support. They are still active, they're still used, still maintained, and you can use those as well. They give you a little bit more insight on what's happening inside of those. Now, the big new use is that Oracle RAC support for Docker is coming soon. So this is something that has been asked for a long, long time, ever since we basically introduced the single instance Docker image. We didn't support RAC just yet. RAC is currently going through extensive testing inside Docker already, so we already have internally Docker images, and we're just testing those now, and we hope that we will have RAC support within the next couple of months coming, as well as images for running RAC inside Docker. And I'm pleased to the next slide, Maria. So for those of you who haven't looked at it yet, what do you get when you run Oracle database inside Docker? You essentially get a single CDB PDB environment. That's just to the fact that that's the new preferred architecture. But because it's a single PDB CDB environment, you don't need the multi-tenant option. So you don't have to buy multi-tenant for this in order to run. You actually also get the very same for standard edition 2 as well in the configuration. The good thing that you actually have with this configuration is that you can unplug the PDB bidirectional. So one of the things that are not that easy for other databases, for example, running in Docker, is to take the database out of the Docker container. You can do it, you can do export, import, and so forth, but it takes a little bit of work. In Oracle, you can actually just, for example, unplug the PDB and put it into a real database. So in the slide here, for example, you have this PDB here on the left-hand side in a Docker container. If you would like to, for example, very common use cases, develop locally on your laptop inside a Docker container, and then take that database and put it somewhere in a UAT environment outside of Docker, you can do so by just unplugging and plugging in the other environment. And likewise, if you ever have a UAT environment or some test environment that you would now like to test locally on your latest build or something like that, you can also just unplug the PDB and plug it into your Docker container on your laptop, for example. Next slide, please, Maria. So I do get the question a lot, why Oracle database in Docker, why databases in Docker in general? And if you look at a very high level of what Docker does, it's actually very, very similar to our container database or multi-tenant architecture. And because of that similarity, you get very much the very same benefits. So what we have done with 12.1, we've essentially taken the database and separated the user data dictionary from the system data dictionary, but we've done more than that. So we have separated the user data dictionary, put it into a PDB, so everybody can have their own pluggable database, self-contained, with their own data files and so forth. And then we have introduced this concept that the CDB, what's an Oracle instance in the end, will be the runtime for one or many PDBs. So all the system data dictionary, all the background processes, all the memory structures and so forth, they only run once by this runtime called the container database, the Oracle instance. Now Docker actually does this very much the same, just on a level below, on the host, on the OS level, where you have the Docker runtime, which is just an orchestration layer on top of C groups or Linux containers, and it will allow you to run one or many containers, as in OS containers, on top of that machine. So just the very same as you have on database, where you have multiple PDBs running on one runtime. On Docker, you can have multiple containers running on one, OS containers running on one runtime on one host. Now, why has this become so popular? Well, because in general in Docker space, because it gives you a layer of abstraction. So as long as you put anything inside one Docker container or one Docker image, you can run it anywhere where you run Docker on a host. The same is true with database. Once you put everything into a PDB, you can take the PDB anywhere. As long as you have a CDB somewhere, you can plug it in and run it there. So there's very much the similarities, and this is just another level why we wanted, or a level of integration that we wanted, where we said, okay, the world on the apps land is going towards Docker. They like Docker a lot for those concepts. While we have multi-tenant and PDB, those are great concepts. And we still highly recommend to run anything mission critical on our MAA, our maximum availability architecture. But likewise, we also actually wanted to give developers, or just people who want to use the technology to build something new, to test something out, an easy way and means to spin up an Oracle database inside a Docker container, just like they would spin up the entire other stack inside another Docker container, perhaps. And so next slide, please, Maria. The other very big news with 18c that we announced that, okay, one question came in, is there any licensing guide model for Oracle and Docker? That's a very good question. Now, it's important to understand that Docker does not fall under the approved hard partitioning technologies. That means that technologies like Oracle Virtual Machine, where we say, okay, it's hard partitioning, you can actually split up a given host to, let's say you have 24 cores, to only 4 cores, and run your Oracle database in there, and therefore you only license 4 cores. There is a corporate document out there which technologies are approved. Those apply to all Oracle software licensing models, and Docker does not fall in that. Do we think it's likely that this will ever happen? Actually, no, we don't, because Docker themselves, so the technology itself, actually doesn't classify itself as a virtualization environment, but as a containerization environment. And so, for example, one thing that you will see is if you spin up a Docker container, you do have the capabilities to restrict the amount of CPU used. So if we stay with this 24 CPU example, and you say to give it only 4 CPUs, you can restrict it. The container inside, however, will still see 24 CPUs. It's not partitioned at all. The only thing that happens is that the C groups technology underneath Docker on the Linux OS will just schedule your processes for only having the equivalent of 4 CPUs. So you only end up getting less schedule time on the CPU to the equivalent of 4 CPUs, but your software will still run across all the 24 CPUs. So the other one big thing that we have announced at Open World last year is that we will be releasing Express Edition again. So there will be an Oracle Database 18c Express Edition scheduled for this summer. The one big news there is that we have actually changed the way how we do Express Edition. So Express Edition, which started in 10.2, was mostly targeted towards having a small footprint database, considering the bandwidth restrictions that were in place back then, almost 20 years ago, and others. While this was great, and this was very useful to actually get your hands onto an Oracle database. In order to do so for us, we actually had to strip out certain functionality to make the database smaller. So we took things out like partitioning, compression, and so forth. Technologies that you perhaps will actually very well like to develop your application with or against, where you could say something like, I want to apply a partitioning scheme now from my application app. But you couldn't do so in XE because the functionality was simply not there. It would throw an error. Now, fast forwarding into 2018, we made this decision that given that the new XE version over those years, going from 10.2 to 11.2 to now 18C, would become bigger anyway, as compared to what the 11G and 10G XE versions were. There's no point anymore to withhold that functionality. So what we rather would like to do is give people an enterprise edition-like environment, a single instance enterprise edition-like environment that they can use free of charge to develop, to test, even to run their workloads in production if they like. There's two caveats to this. Number one, and that was always true of XE, there is zero support, so you cannot file a support ticket for Express Edition, nor can you get patches for Express Edition. So certainly, although you can use Express Edition for production, we highly not recommend it to run anything mission critical on it because you will not get any support for this. But if you have some small environment like a web page that needs a database or something, you can very well use XE for that as well. And this is also one thing that's used today, how it's used today already. Now, the other caveat to this is that it will essentially resource constrain itself. And those resource constraints limits are also nothing new with XE. It always has been there. We actually lifted it up a bit. We now allow 12 gigabytes of user storage across that database, and we limit it to 2 gigabytes of SGA, as well as 2 foreground CPUs. But the database will do everything by itself so that the user or developer can just rely on to just download the software and get it up and running and develop against without running against any licensing restrictions. So software will all do that for you already anyway. The other big news to this is because it has nearly all the EE single instance functionality included, it will also come as a CDB PDB environment. And as XE is completely free, you're free to create one or more PDBs in that environment if you like to do so. So there are no options or any licensing that you have to do with XE, of course. The other really nice thing about this is it's actually fully upwards compatible with Standard Edition 2 or Enterprise Edition. So if you would like to go ahead, for example, and start developing an XE in a PDB, and then say, okay, great, we have developed this now. Now I would like to put it into a production environment, send it to my customer in his production environment, and so forth. You can actually just, again, unplug or clone the PDB and put it into an Enterprise Edition with zero overhead of migration, export, import, and so forth to get it actually to the version because they are compatible. Now, there's one question in the chat that came up during my XE speech. Oracle currently provides free VirtualBox images with pre-installed Oracle products. Could you do the same with Docker images, please? I am not quite sure what the question means because we do provide free Docker images with pre-installed Oracle products already today, and those can be found on the container registry or the Docker store. If you click through the Docker store license agreement, for example, it will say you either have a license purchased by Oracle and comply to all the standards, rights, and use, or you automatically comply to the regular OTN license where you will get the Oracle software today perhaps already as well. So either or, if you would like to just test it, you don't have any licensing agreement, you automatically agree to the OTN license, same as you would download the software from OTN today.
All right, so Gerald, I think that is the end of our presentation. So let me stop the share and we can start opening it up to more questions. And then, of course, I can get to see your lovely face.
Same here. So yes, so now please, we open it up for general questions. Anything Oracle database related, please feel free to just type them into the chat, and Maria and I will do the best to answer those.
Yeah. In the meantime, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, Gerald, is there any new features or anything in 18C that you're excited about that you want to bring up?
Anything in 18C that I'm excited about? There's too many things in 18C that I'm excited about. I just got a question in from Stephen, actually.
Okay.
Which is very nice. The question is, my UI developers don't want to hear about tables and joins. They want to hear about JSON. Can we give them what they want? And the answer to that is we actually do this since 12.102. So that was 2014, I believe, that it came out, 13 or 4, 2014. Yeah. We do have full JSON support within Oracle database. It's part of our XDB kit, our feature set, I should say, which is somewhat confusing because that was all the original XMLDB stuff that we did there, which is still out there as well. But the important notion to that is, as it's part of this kit, it's actually available for all editions. So this is a non-licensable feature. So you can use this today already in SE2 and EE. And of course, it will come in XE as well as soon as we have 18C. And you don't have to license anything. It allows you, it gives you full native JSON support. So not only like just storing JSON in a blob and then, you know, it's like, yeah, it's in there in the database, but you cannot query against, etc. But we have actually extended the SQL engines and many other functionalities, indexing and so forth, to store JSON natively, to query JSON natively, to index JSON in a full text index manner rather than a B-tree manner. And we actually went a step further and also provided a document API. So something, the APIs, how you store and retrieve JSON, are very different from SQL statements that most of our folks are probably used to. You have more operations that are put and get like. So we also provided an API for that. It's called SODA, which stands for Simple Oracle Document Access API. That gives you such a document store-like API. So even if you're developers or yourself, you don't want to deal with insert into statement, select from, but just want to have put, you know, store the JSON document, get, you can use this API to do so. And the API will just model it on top of SQL again. So it's sort of like similar things that an ORM system would do for you. So, which means you have the best of both worlds. You could use this API if you like, but you can also use SQL if you like. You can do very complex aggregations with SQL. And one big advantage that we have over what we call single model document stores, so databases that only store JSON, you can actually store it alongside with relational, with XML, with graph. And the big advantage there is that we can actually query across all of those. So you can quite happily write SQL statements where you can just join across all of those and aggregate across of those. And you will find that there aren't that many databases out there that are actually capable of that.
That's very cool. Actually, one of the things I like about it, being an old school relational person, is the data guide that it provides, because oftentimes with JSON documents, you've no idea what's in there, right? What key values have been stored in those JSON documents, and the data guide allows somebody like me who's very used to being able to do a describe on a table and seeing all of the attributes or columns on that table. It gives me that same ability to look inside the JSON that's stored in the database and see exactly what columns or key values are stored in that JSON document. And then it makes writing queries or writing SQL against it much simpler. And I think it's quite unique to Oracle to have such a clever guide into the JSON, right?
That is correct, yes. So for all people who haven't come across JSON Data Guide yet, that's what the feature is called. We had a very interesting use case that we got from customers. So JSON, the whole notion around JSON documents, why do people use JSON, is what they call schema flexibility. So where you can essentially change the structure of the JSON per document, because they're all self-contained within the document. And then we had quite interesting use cases where customers came to us and said, great, so now I have 5 terabytes of JSON in my database, and they are all flexible schemas, which means I have no clue what's stored in there. And now the regulators came along and said, are you sure that there's not a single credit card number in there? And they were like, well, we have no way of actually saying, right? We have to basically load those 5 terabytes of data out of the database, and then just parse all of them and figure out whether there's anything in there. And JSON Data Guide was an answer to that, where we said, well, actually, thanks to the full text index that we already have there, where we essentially index every attribute and the values of those attributes, we internally already know the structure of each individual JSON document. So how about we just actually expose this via SQL, via some functionality to the end user? And this is exactly what Maria was just saying about with the JSON Data Guide is the answer to that, where essentially it allows you to say, okay, give me the structure of all JSON, and it will tell you, okay, in that collection, okay, in this table with all those JSON documents, those 5 terabytes, you have all those attributes there. And if, you know, you can just query then and say, well, you know, there's something in there that says credit card number, there's something in there that says CCN or something like that. Or we also give you the type of that. So we know whether if there is never ever a string occurring or date occurring, but it's always a number, then we tell you, well, up until now, that attribute is only of number, there's only numbers stored in there. And of course, we can then reiterate over that as new documents come in.
All right, so we've got a couple of more questions for you, Gerald. So there's some questions if there are any significant enhancements for advanced queuing in 18C, or even I would think in 12.2.
Yes, so actually I go even a bit further back, because advanced queuing had quite a significant enhancement already in 12.1, and we did not really cover it well, to be honest. And in hindsight, it's now a bit confusing. With Oracle 12.1, we introduced sharded queues, which is very different from Oracle sharding. Because sharded queues are there to actually have rack affinity on rack nodes. So it's actually a scalability technology in AQ to make AQ scale more on rack. So this has come somewhat under the covers. It's there since 12.1. We essentially will partition the queues and then keep those rack affinity behind the covers for you, so that you don't send blocks across the interconnect all the time. As into 12.2, they have enhanced this further. They are focusing a lot on the scalability aspect of AQ. And right now, we're actually working on better integration with other queuing and streaming technologies. Certainly Kafka is one of those. So to go from and to Kafka, as you may wish, to go both directions or either direction, seamless with AQ as well, which is very similar to what we did in the past with making AQ and JMS, this Java messaging service API, seamless, so that you can send messages from and to JMS as well. So we got another question in, Maria, for Armin, which I will give to you.
Don't give it to me, because I don't know the answer either.
Well, I haven't read it yet. So Armin question, I have a January 15 full backup of my database. I'm tasked to restore it with no archive log recovery, so as to have my database just as it was on January 15. How do I do that, please? That is actually also a question I don't really know the answer to.
Armin is not my area of expertise. So I believe that we have other AskTOM Office Hours where you can probably get an answer to that are more focused on Armin. In fact, the next one coming up should be March 16th. So it would be a fantastic question to ask over there. Apologies that it's beyond the scope of Gerald and I's expertise, but there is some recommendations from somebody else, actually, which is quite interesting, that they're suggesting perhaps you can use the set until time capabilities within Armin to achieve what it is that you're after. But for now, I would check with the Oracle documentation or hold your question until the March 16th AskTOM Office Hour.
I have certainly recorded the question, will forward it to the team so that we will make sure that they will cover it on the 16th. Okay, then another question, Maria. How about an overview of diagnostics and a cheat sheet for associated DB tuning for 18C, AWR analysis, etc., or any associated recommendations?
So we actually already have that in the Oracle database with ADAM, or our Automatic Diagnostic Detection Management System, or monitor. Adam, what it does is it looks at the AWR reports and uses, for want of a better word, AI or machine learning to find patterns in your data in the AWR reports and make recommendations. So that tool exists today. So if you have access to AWR, so you have the diag and tuning packs, then you have access to Adam or ADDM, and it will, I always call it Adam, I know it's not.
Sorry, that's like sooner or later we will have to come up with a fixture's face to stick on Adam.
It used to be Graham in a box, but yeah, maybe. But ADDM is the acronym for the tool, and it already does that for you. But we also do have a lot of blogs and videos about how to read and analyze AWR reports. The Real World Performance team have shared theirs on YouTube. They've got a fantastic series there. You just need to go to YouTube and search for Oracle Real World Performance, and they've got a whole series of videos there, some of which will walk you through an AWR report and give you that cheat sheet about where to look first, and based on what you find in those sections, where to drill down into the rest of the report. So whether you want to take advantage of Adam, and starting in 12.2, the Adam output should actually appear in the AWR reports, or if you want to go after it yourself and dig deeper into an AWR report, then I strongly recommend you look at that series of videos from the Real World Performance team on how to do that.
So that just was a follow-up question that came in on that one. Does AWR need special license in 18C?
Yes. So AWR has always, since its introduction in 10G, has required you to have the tuning pack. And then a lot of the tools that rely on the information in AWR are part of the diagnostics pack. So typically people have both of those together, the tuning and diagnostic packs, which are EM packs that go on top of the Oracle database. They are required to do all of the fancy tricks with AWR. That said, if you don't have access to the diag and tuning pack, a lot of the same information is available from StatsPack, which is still shipped with the Oracle database. It is still available to you. It's the scripts that control StatsPack are part of the RDBMS admin directory in your Oracle home. They're all still there. You do need to manually set up the snapshots yourself, but it's pretty straightforward to automate that. And there's a lot of documentation out there on the web on how to use StatsPack if that's something you don't have access to AWR and that's something you want to use.
Thank you, Maria. Another question, I'll take that one, I suppose. AQ capability to integrate with Kafka is similar to Oracle Golden Gate for big data. How does it compare? Not quite similar. So Golden Gate is replication technology. So it's replicating from like one HDFS cluster to another one, or from HDFS to database and vice versa and so forth. The AQ integration is more that you can actually make AQ a source or destination for Kafka. So you can do this today, but you have to write it yourself. And we just provide the APIs. So if you already use AQ, for example, today in your environment, and you would say, hey, we have now this Kafka cluster that we set up, and I would like to everything that goes through AQ land in Kafka as well, then you can do that, and vice versa. If you say, hey, you know what, there's this messages in Kafka and we actually want to propagate them or send them to this database over there into AQ, then you can do that as well. But it's very different. It's not a full one-to-one replication such as Golden Gate would do to separate. It's just a mere integration, as in making AQ source or destination for Kafka. Then another question, data guard question. The primary has been refreshed with data from another database with ARM and duplicate, thus wrecking the standby. Any ideas on how to either avoid wrecking the standby or how to reconstruct it quickly?
I'm guessing you're looking at me to answer that one. Either of us are backup and recovery experts. And again, that's probably a question that would be best answered in the AskTOM office hours that are coming in March 16th that'll cover this. But just to give you a brief update from my limited knowledge of DataGuard, you can tell that this is not the area, backup and recovery is not the area of expertise of either of us. But with DataGuard, it will replicate all changes that are logged in the primary database to the standby. If you're using RMAN duplicate, if there's no way to log those changes, then they won't be replicated to the DataGuard standby. And other than reestablishing the full standby from a full backup, I'm not aware of any way that you can quickly reconstruct the standby once it's been destroyed, once it basically is no longer a mirror of the production environment. My understanding is you are going to have to quickly rebuild it. But as I said, I'm no expert. There may actually be a much better way to do that, Frank. So if you can wait and ask that question or redirect that question to the folks on March 16th. But in the meantime, we'll try and get some answers and make sure that on that March 16th, ask Tom, that these questions are shared with that team so that they can address them straight away at the beginning of that session.
So next question, is InMemory option going to be available with 18C XE or other options like advanced security option, advanced compression option, and so forth? And the answer to that is yes. So as said before, the new goal for XE is to be essentially a resource constrained enterprise edition version or an enterprise edition version for, thank you, just came in, for developers. So all the single instance functionality that you would expect to have in an enterprise edition, you will have with XE available as well. In memory and so forth, you're bound to those resource constraints. So we only give you 2 gig of SGA, which means you can have 2 terabytes in memory and try to analyze, but it is available and for you to work with it.
Great. So, I mean, that's going to become a really good platform for developers to really get their feet wet with all of the features and functionality of the Oracle database and develop their applications with that.
Yes, and I would actually even go further than that. So even just to test the new functionality out, so not going beyond the developers. So it's really good for developers to build something, but it will be a really good platform for anybody who wants to get hold of an Oracle database, test something out, try something out, build something, as long as it's within those resource constraints or limitations.
So we got a question there to repeat the full name of the performance team. So if you're on YouTube and you're trying to search for the videos I was referring to a few moments ago about how to navigate through an AWR report, what you need to search for is Oracle Real World Performance. There you go. And Stephen has just put it in the chat for us. So you should find it there, Oracle Real World Performance Team. And what you'll see is some gold cogs as their logo or image at the beginning of their videos. That's the right set of videos, and you can just search through their whole directory or their whole channel full of videos there. You'll find all the ones to do with AWR and performance tuning. So there was a question for you, Gerald, about the availability of 18C XE on Windows platform.
Yes, it will be available on Windows and Linux, just like the XEs before.
And it looks like we've gotten some help too on our DataGuard issue. Someone's given us a MOS note to look up using snapshot standby database. That might be useful to help address that question. So thanks, Christian, for your jumping in and helping us out with that. And so any other favorite features in the new release, Gerald, not even in 18C, possibly something in 12.2 that you like?
Yeah, so that's going back to our previous conversation, isn't it? So I think some of the features, or the features that I like most from 12C onwards to 18C now, is obviously the JSON support. I'm a big fan of that. SQL pattern matching that we introduced with 12.1, actually, 12.101, I believe. In 18C, we have private temporary tables coming along, which is great, but actually we just got, in 12.201, we got fully compliant with the new NC-SQL JSON standard extension, which is cool because we actually were compliant before the standard was officially released. So we're the first database to be NC-SQL JSON extension compliant. That was cool. In 18C, a couple of other nice things that we've done in the in-memory area. As you probably know, Maria, you might want to cover that quickly.
In fact, yeah, it looks like we just got a question on that that's saying,
Okay.
are the ILM features supported in 18C? Things like ADO and heat map and in database archiving. And so the answer to that is yes, all of the ILM features and functionality are available and supported in 18C. And what's actually really nice about it, and what Gerald was alluding to there, is that based on ADO and the heat map, starting in 12.2, but also extended in 18C, you can now manage the content of your in-memory column store using that technology. So you can use the heat map, or we will automatically use the heat map to determine which objects are being accessed in an analytical manner that would benefit from being inside of the in-memory column store, and they'll be automatically populated into the column store, and older or colder data that's no longer being accessed that currently resides in the column store can be automatically aged out for you. So starting in 12.2, you could use ADO to define policies to manage the content of your column store. In 18C, we can do it fully automatically for you based off on the heat map. So yes, all of those features are still there. And as I said, one of the nice things in 18C is that full automation of what should be brought in and out of the column store and when. So pretty cool technology. One of my other favorite features in 18C, of course, is the proper integration with Active Directory. So you no longer have to put the Oracle LDAP server in between. Now you can do the full integration with the Oracle database and Active Directory straight. There's a complete API now that allows that to be much simpler and much more efficient for folks. So if you're using Active Directory and you've been putting extra hops in to try and make it work with the Oracle database, that should all be much more seamless in 18C, which is a pretty neat new feature that hopefully will make people's lives a little easier.
We already have the first wow, I believe. But yeah, no more Oracle Internet Directory if you're just using it for having an Oracle database talk to your corporate Active Directory. So that's a great feature as well. We got some scalability enhancements also in REC coming or out there now with 18C, saying that we now use RDMA, this remote direct memory access, for undo blocks over the shipping over the interconnect on Exadata environments, which means that we dramatically reduce the latency of shipping undo blocks across the interconnect. Why undo blocks? Because those tend to be a lot of times the blocks that are sent most to keep the consistency of selects going on other nodes while data is being modified on another node.
I think one of the other big things people will start to notice, Gerald, as we go forward with this, now that Oracle is a cloud provider and we end up having to patch and maintain thousands of systems, that online patching and rolling patching has become a huge focus for us. And there are great improvements in 18C in this area. Things like the fact that we can do online grid infrastructure patching and online database patching and rolling patching has become has been hugely improved to make sure that we've got plenty of availability as we're doing that. So what I was mentioning there is this grid infrastructure. I mean, if you are running in a rack environment, typically you've got different layers of software. You've got the database software. Underneath that, you've got the grid infrastructure. And if you needed to patch the grid infrastructure on one of the rack nodes, we'd have to turn off the database instance or shut down the database instance on that rack node, bring down the grid infrastructure, patch it, bring it back up, and then bring the database node back up, or the database on that node back up. That's no longer necessary in 18C. The instance running on that rack node can actually be looked after by the grid infrastructure on one of the other rack nodes while we bring down the grid infrastructure on this node, patch it, and bring it back up while the database instance remains up. So again, allowing us to do a lot more of the patching and maintenance operations while the system is online, increasing the availability of the systems. And as I said, there's nothing like having to drink your own champagne to focus the mind and make sure that everybody is moving towards that one goal, which, as I said, is a great benefit for us as a cloud provider, but also a huge benefit for our customers as well.
Yes, absolutely. So there's one question that came in, and it is, does that online patching make Flex ASM mandatory?
For that grid infrastructure, yes, it is taking advantage of the Flex ASM under the covers. That's allowing it to have the instance, the database instance on that rack node talk to one of the other grid infrastructure homes. Flex ASM is allowing that to happen. But so for that part of it, yes. For the general database rolling patches, no, but for the grid infrastructure part, yes.
And then another of my favorite features, oh, sorry, there is a follow-up question, actually. What you just said, Maria, about grid infrastructure patching has been outlined in yesterday's office hour about REC. I guess it was recorded. Yes, thank you very much, Frank, for that. So there was the REC session on yesterday, and if you want more details about that, look for that office hour and watch the recording.
At this stage, the answer to everything will be in in another office hour, which will make our lives much easier, Gerald. We'll just be able to say, oh, that was answered. But as Stephen has pointed out, we are going to publish all of those, the previous session recordings so far of office hours. If you're not familiar with this is an ongoing series that we have here at Oracle, and lots of the product managers from across all the different disciplines here in the Oracle database team have been doing these office hours, each of which is going to be recorded. So if you can't get enough of the lovely Gerald and I, and you'd like to watch it again, that you can rewatch any of the sessions, whether you attended them or not. They will be made available for folks to be able to view them.
And I will also redirect that next question to the recording of that office hour. The question is, does the rolling patching of grid software apply to grid version 12.201?
Yes, I think it'd be better to address that or take a look at that. I'm sure they covered it in the previous office hours. I'm not a grid infrastructure specialist, but I am aware that we do it in 18C. I'm not sure if we do it in 12.201. So the previous office hour where it was discussed, I'm sure gives you details on exactly what's required and when it was supported.
Now, another feature that I want to highlight before the next, or until the next question comes in, is something that I personally like a lot, and I think we kind of always skim it over a bit. We kind of say like, oh yeah, finally we got it as well. But I think for the people out there, it's a big deal. And what I'm talking about is about the partitioning enhancements that we had actually with 12.2 as well as with 18C. So if people don't know yet, with 12.201, that released that South since over a year now, you can actually now split partitions online. So you can now just go in and say alter table split partition fully online, no outage to take there anymore. And also you can now alter a table, a non-partition table, and make it a partition table fully online. So no more, oh, I will need to partition that, or I have to stop all applications or workload and so forth. No, you just type in alter table partition by, and we do this fully online, fully consistent. That's a feature that I'm personally like a lot, because this is something I've come across so often, and you cannot just stop the world to change your table to partitional. Now, what's new in 18C was the next step to that. So as we could split partitions in 12.2 online, you can now also merge partitions online in 18C. So if you have two small partitions or a bunch of small partitions and you would like to merge them together in a bigger one, you can do this in a fully online. And you can also modify a partition table to another partition table. So let's say you say, okay, here I have my non-partition table, and I'm gonna range partition it by something, and I say alter table partition by range, and then that's happening fully online. And then it turns out, well, actually range wasn't really the real thing to do here. The best thing to do here, maybe I need hash partitioning, and you can just say alter table partition by hash, and it will again just repartition fully online.
Yeah, what's really nice about that, and people don't always get this when they hear the online part of it, is that of course I could have always done a create table as select and created the new hash partition table. but I have no way of knowing what's changing underneath the covers while I'm doing that operation. In other words, what DML operations are happening on the original table. And by using or taking advantage of these online operations, the responsibility for keeping the new table in sync with the existing table is all on Oracle. We take care of all of that automatically for you. So you don't have to put the tables into a read-only mode in order to do that, which makes all of those online operations really critical as we basically are getting less and less maintenance windows in these systems where they're all becoming 24/7. It actually helps a lot to have so many online operations. All right, so it looks like we've got another one. This one in terms of Exadata of all kinds. Do you know of a, okay, so in a shop with multiple Oracle databases of all kinds, do you know a quick way to identify whether I'm logged on to an Exadata database? I'm guessing versus a non-Exadata database.
Yeah.
Do I know a quick way to do it? I mean, there's lots of different ways you could do it. You can check your session statistics to see whether you're getting any of the Exadata, but I also, the cell CLI is probably the easiest way to see if you've got access to cell CLI on the database server, then you surely are. But Gerald, do you know of a quick way to identify that you're on an Exadata? I used to know this stuff really well. I can't remember now.
I don't think we have something like where you would say, you know, select star from $V version or something, and it will tell you, oh, this is a database on Exadata. As you know, we always held true to the statement that our software will run, the same software runs anywhere. It just runs better on Exadata. So
Right.
we didn't produce a new database version or something for this. It just make the things under the covers better. So certainly, as you said before, you know, you can start looking at whether or not you see any of the offload statistics kicking in, etc. But there, as far as I know, if you're in the database, there is no definite way to say, okay, I am on an Exadata. It may, there's no offload happening. If you are on the host, however, then cell CLI and things like that will give it away that it is an Exadata. But if you're just logged on a database and you want to see, I think my best guess would be to see the statistics.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And somebody has kindly shared one of Connor McDonald's videos on the merge partition online, so that that new feature has already been documented in the Oracle documentation and also on YouTube by Connor. If you want to just take a look at that and see what it looks like. He did a very cute video of multiple Connors being merged together. So yeah, that's available. So we're getting very close to the top of the hour. The good news is these are going to be monthly office hours going forward. You'll get the lucky opportunity to spend quality time with Gerald and I again in a month's time. So any database questions you may have that didn't get addressed today, you want to join us next month, that would be great. We may also start to post particular topics to try and drill this in a little narrower. We may post some topics going forward as well for the office hours, but you can subscribe to join those office hours and also submit your questions offline. So if there is a particular topic or question you want us to cover, please don't hesitate to submit those and we'll certainly address them. As we mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded and will be made available in the coming days. That you'll get an email to tell you that it's available. We'll also share all of the follow-up information and links that we mentioned. So I'll share the link to the real-world performance data as well as the MOS notes that we refer to. All of those links will be supplied along with the video. And for now, Gerald and I would just like to thank you very much for joining us this morning, making this a fun and interactive session. And we look forward to talking to most of you, if not all of you, again next month.
Thank you very much for joining.